So today we are on Canto 3, Chapter 14, Text 1 and 2. So I'll just read the first verse by myself, and then we'll responsively do verse 2. Shri Shuka Uvacha Nishamya Koshara Vino Pavarnitam Hare Katam Karana Sukaratmanaha Punasa Praprachatam Udyatanjalaya Nachati Tripto Viduro Drita Vrataha. So this verse reads in English, Sukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from the great sage Maitreya about the Lord's incarnation as Varaha, Vidura, who had taken a vow, begged him with folded hands to please narrate further transcendental activities of the Lord, since he, Vidura, did not yet feel satisfied. So I'll just reread that. Sukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from the great sage Maitreya about the Lord's incarnation as Varaha, Vidura, who had taken a vow, begged him with folded hands to please narrate further transcendental activities of the Lord, since he, Vidura, did not yet feel satisfied. Okay, so this verse we will do responsibly. Vidura Uvacha Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hata iti anushushuma Hata iti anushushuma Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hataiti Anushushama Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hataiti Anushushuma Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hatiti Anushushuma Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hatiti Anushushuma Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hati iti anushushuma. Ladies. Vidura Uvacha Tenaiva tu muni shrestha Harina Yagyamurtina Adidaityo Hiranyaksho Hateti Anushushuma Vidura Uvacha. Sri Vidura said, Tena, by him, Eva, certainly, Tu, but, Muni Shrestha, O chief among the sages, Harina, by the personality of Godhead, Yagyamurtina, the form of sacrifices, Adi, original, Daityaha, demon, Hiranyaksha, by the name Hiranyaksha, Hataha, slain, Iti, thus, Anushushuma, heard in succession. So this verse translates into English. Sri Vidura said, O chief amongst the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices, the personality of Godhead, Lord Boar. So, responsively, we can recite. Sri Vidura said, O chief amongst the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices, the personality of Godhead, Lord Boar. Okay, so here's Prabhupada's purport. As referred to previously, the Boar incarnation was manifest in 2 millenniums, namely Swayambhuva and Chakshusha. In both millenniums, there was a Boar incarnation of the Lord, but in the Swayambhuva millennium, he lifted the earth from within the water of the universe, whereas in the Chakshusha millennium, he killed the first demon, Hiranyaksha. In the Swayambhuva millennium, he assumed the color white, and in the Chakshusha millennium, he assumed the color red. Vidura had already heard about one of them. Vidura had already heard about one of them, and he proposed to hear about the other. The 2 different Boar incarnations described are the one Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vidura uvacha tenaiva tu muni shrestha harina yagyamurtina adidaityo hiranyaksho hatiti anushushuma. Sri Vidura said, O chief amongst the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices, the personality of Godhead, Lord Boar. So, we were hearing in the last chapter that the Boar incarnation, Varaha, was being described as the Yagya Purush, or the one to whom sacrifices are offered. So that's where we get this little allusion to, that's by the way, allusion, not illusion, allusion to him being the personality of sacrifice. And of course, as we've been kind of puzzling over, the Bhagavatam seems to give us 2 colors, red and white, the white in the Swayambhuva Manu and the red in the Chakshusha Manu. And in the white, the Boar was generated. He came into our view when Lord Brahma was thinking how to fulfill Swayambhuva Manu's request to give him a place to carry out his duties. So the earth at that time was merged in the waters of devastation. So as Brahma was thinking how to bring the earth up out of the waters of devastation. Then the boar came out of his nose and grew to huge proportions. And that is the Shukla, or white incarnation. Now, later in the Chakshusha incarnation, that's when Hiranyaksha will be born along with his brother Hiranyakasipu. And in that Manu, the boar will be red in color and will fight and kill Hiranyaksha. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the blue incarnation doesn't exist, as was found by our Natabar a few days ago in the Lagu Bhagavatam Rita, yes. And so these incarnations of the Supreme Lord are amazing, and that's actually all the Supreme Lord has to do. He only has to engage in pastimes. Any kind of business or hard work, he can do it by his energies. As we were saying the other day, that verse from the Svetasvatara Upanishad, I think it's 3.7-8, Tam Ishvaranam Paramam Maheshwaram Tam Devatanam Paramam Chadaivatam Patim Patinam Paramam Parastad Vidam Adevam Bhuvameshamidyam Natasya Karyam Karanam Chavidyate Natatchavas Chabyadikas Chadrishyate Parasya Shaktir Vividaya Shuyate Swabhavaki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. So that verse is saying that of all controllers or Ishvaras, there's one supreme Maheshvara, controller of all the controllers. Out of all devas or demigods, there's one supreme demigod. Of all patinam, of all planetary leaders, there's one supreme leader. And no one is equal to or greater than this leader. And in fact, his energies work wonderfully. He can accomplish anything in any kind of way. His energies are automatic, and in this way he accomplishes whatever he wants. So Krishna's energies are intelligent and they're unlimited, so he could accomplish anything in a split second simply by wanting it to happen. Of course, where would we have pastimes if he was constantly doing that? There would be no point in anything, because if he wanted to eat something, it would just appear. Wouldn't even need to appear. He would just feel satiated, and he wouldn't even need to eat. Why would he need servants? He can accomplish everything himself immediately and much better than any servant could do it. Why does the Supreme Lord need to go anywhere? He's already everywhere. Why does he need to do anything? Everything's already existing in him. He has no needs to fulfill. He has no enemy to vanquish. He has no knowledge to gather or learn. So essentially, he doesn't need to do anything. However, he engages in pastimes. And so engaging in pastimes, he has enjoyment. And so what many religions don't know is that not only is the Supreme Lord the reservoir of all unlimited energies, but the Supreme Lord is also the reservoir of all limited energies. So the Supreme Lord has not only unlimited energies, but limited energies as well. Like we are examples of his limited energies. We are certainly energies of the Supreme. And we are perfect and complete, but we are limited. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vishishyate, as the issue Upanishad tells us. That so we are perfect and complete, but we are not self-sufficient, and we are not unlimited, we are limited. And similarly, when he engages in pastimes, those pastimes have to have some limitations, otherwise, what would be the point? Everything could just happen automatically and completely. And eventually you could get back to the white light, where everything could be all one hum, and nothing happens at all. There's no need for anything to happen. It's just blissful, and there's nothing going on. But that ain't the way it is, because the Supreme Lord engages in pastimes. And for pastimes to happen, there have to be limitations, and the Lord self-imposes those limitations on himself, and he enjoys them. And his living entities try to help in various ways. And because they use their free will to please him as opposed to ignore him, the Supreme Lord relishes with his parts and parcels, the tatastha shakti, the vibhinamsas, the tiny particle living entities. So he enjoys with them. And in some cases, as in this case, he fights with two powerful demons. And of course, in the Madhurya Kadambini, we learn that Jai and Vijay actually volunteered for the task. They, put their hands up and volunteered. There's a prayer that's quoted in the Madhurya Kadambini, which says from Jai and Vijay that, my dear Lord, we see that you are eager to engage in a battle in the material world. And we have made an inventory of the material world and discovered that there are no powerful demons at this point in the material world. So we are not inimical to you, but we are very powerful. And at the same time, there are no powerful demons in the material world. So please make it so that we can assist you in this, because we cannot bear that your desires go unfulfilled in any kind of way. So this is the prayer that Jai and Vijay made. Of course, after that, they were gatekeepers, and the four Kumaras came. The four Kumaras were barred from going in. They cursed Jai and Vijay. And so Jai and Vijay had the option of being 3 times demons or 7 times devotees. They chose the 3 times demons because they were trying to fulfill the Lord's desire. And thus they came to the material world to take up the role of Hiranyaksa and Hiranyakasipu. So they knew the Supreme Lord wanted a martial contest. He wanted to engage in some kind of fighting, so they were glad to oblige. And of course, he made their consciousness so that they would not recognize the fact that they were demons, and they could nicely engage in battle with the Supreme. First, of course, Hiranyaksha is slain by the Supreme. Then later, Hiranyakasipu will be slain by a different incarnation, by Nrsingadev. So the Supreme Lord enjoys in this way. And by the way, it's also said by our acharyas that sometimes Jai and Vijay are genuine demons. So this is a kind of, not Jai and Vijay, but Hiranyaksa and Hiranyakasipu are genuine demons. So this, like many pastimes, happens at least pro forma in a kind of basic blueprint again and again. Of course, as we said the other day, there will be no point in the Supreme Lord absolutely duplicating each pastime to the very second, to the very iota. There will be no point in that. So each time the Supreme Lord carries out one of his pastimes, it's a little different. And this gives variety, and it also makes it possible to integrate the living entities at that time, because the tableau or the chessboard of what living entities are doing, what they're doing, is different subtly every time, even if there is a Varaha incarnation or a Kurma incarnation or there is a Vamanadev incarnation. Each time they occur, It's subtly different because the situation is a little bit different, although the overall flow is similar. So in this chapter, there are 3 sections only. From verses 1 through 7, we have Vidura asking to hear more, which is what we just read. Vidura wants to hear more. He's heard about the white Varaha incarnation. He wants to hear about the red one. And he also wants to hear about the fight of why it occurred. And so from 8 through 31, we will hear about Diti. And Diti, of course, is one of the daughters of Daksha and one of the wives of Kasyapa Muni. Kasyapa Muni has 21 wives. And 17 of them are daughters of Daksha. So 4 of them are from some other family. I read that this morning. So, by the way, these daughters of Daksha and wives of Kasyapa Muni are the source of generation of all the various kinds of material bodies that we have in the material world. We will discover that the first of Kasyapa Muni's wives, Aditi, not Diti, but Aditi, is the mother of the demigods. So all the 33 million demigods, they are down the genealogical line from Aditi, along with, of course, Vishnu, etc., etc. So we have these Adityas, as they're called. And then we have the Diti, who is the mother of all the demons, starting with Hiranyaksa and Hiranyakasipu. We'll hear this story, how Diti, unfortunately, was moved by her desire to have children, and as a result, they had sex at a time when twilight was coming in, and that's when Shiva and his various bhutas and pretas, they do their procession. And as a result, this is an inauspicious time, and that's why Diti will give birth to inauspicious children. And then there's Danu, who will give birth to the Danavas, who are another kind of demon. And there are some Rudras involved in that too. And then we'll find that Kadru is the mother of the snakes, that Vinata is the mother of Garuda, and we find there's another one of his wives that's the mother of the plants, one is the mother of the insects, etc., etc. So these various wives of Kasyapa Muni are the source of population. And as we said, 13, it'll be said, will be given to Kasyapa Muni, and then later 4 more will be given. And ultimately we learn that Daksha wanted to expand the population of the universe. So what Daksha did was he arranged from his wife Prasuti. So we find that Manu, which we just talked about in the last chapter, Swayambhuva Manu, had 5 children, 3 girls, 2 boys. The 2 men were Uttanapad and Priyavrata. So Priyavrata goes to the forest and engages in austerities, and Uttanapad becomes the ruler of the earth plane. So that's the 2 male children. Then we have the 3 girls that are Akuti, Prasuti, and Devahuti. So Devahuti is given in marriage to Kardam Muni. So Devahuti becomes Kardam Muni's wife. Prasuti becomes Daksha's wife. And Akuti becomes, I forget, another sage's wife, and I don't remember the name of that sage. But so these three become also part of expanding the cosmos. Now, Daksha, and we're going to hear about this a little bit later on, that Daksha wanted to create progeny because that was his duty, and so he created, through his wife Prasuti, she's also called by other names, but he created 10,000 Hiryashvas, and they were young men, but Narada Muni preached to them and convinced them not to become involved in household life, and as a result they became renounced, which angered Daksha. But Daksha was resourceful, so then he created 1,000 this time, Shavalashvas. And the Shavalashvas also were preached to by Narada Muni. And as a result of being preached to by Narada Muni, the Shavalashvas, they also did the same thing that their older brothers did. They decided not to become involved in household life. And they abandoned the process of performing austerities for household life like their elder brothers did, and instead engaged in spiritual cultivation so that they could become detached. So this time Daksha decided to have 60 girls. So that's what he had, 60 daughters. And they were given 17 of them, as we said, to Kasyapa Muni. 27 were given to the Dharmaraj. Let's see, was it Dharmaraj? Let me take a quick look here at my cheat sheet. 10 were given to Dharmaraj, 17 to Kasyapa Muni, 27 to Chandra, the moon demigod, and 2 to Angira, 2 to Bhuta, and 2 to Krishashva. So that's altogether 60. And we'll also hear in verses to come that Daksha was eager to know who his daughters wanted to marry. And they let it be known through their mother that actually they wanted to be married to these various sages, and so that's how it came to be that 10 of them were married to Yamaraj, 27 of them to the moon god, 17 of them to Kasyapa Muni, and 2 to Angira and Krishashva and Bhuta, which are sages you don't hear about too often. So in this way we see gradually the universal population is getting off the ground. Gradually it's starting to happen. And this is one of the things that we are learning in this section of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are also starting to phase into talking about Diti, so that will be soon in this chapter. And it's quite a often made point, or often made understanding that sex life can be ruinous. Of course, most of us, I'm afraid, probably learned that not from Bhagavatam, but probably from the school of hard knocks at some point earlier in our lives. Because Although everybody in the material world is so much after some kind of sex enjoyment, yet we see that everywhere sex enjoyment creates devastations of various kinds in people's lives, either emotional, social, and what to speak of children that can come as a result of engaging in intercourse. And we see that there is rivalries and unfulfilled desires, there's anger, there's frustration. And all these kind of things are a part of the unpleasant, sticky after effects and side effects of people not being able to control their senses. And that's why we talk about spiritual life and we talk about controlling the senses. Because if we learn to control the senses, particularly the mind, then we won't have such a difficulty controlling the body, particularly the drive for sex life. And of course, we have the institution of marriage, which makes sex life less destructive. So when there are children and they're brought into the world and they have both a mother and a father, and they are brought into a loving relationship, then there's a good chance that those children can be directed toward a spiritual goal. However, if they don't have both a mother and a father, or this is why we have this term Varna Shankara, children who are begotten by accident because some contraception failed, or before two people knew what was going on, they were into engaging in sex life. And as a result now, the lady is pregnant, and then what will we do? So someone is born, yet they weren't really the goal of the process of sex life. They were a mistake, an accident of sex life, a running away of emotional and erotic energies. And so now there's a child on the way, and maybe the mother and father don't want the child. So of course, up till just a little while ago, generally the practice was that the child was just aborted, because in our modern world, people see the fetus as a blob of flesh. They don't see it as a human being, when actually it is a human being. And the Vedas explain that even at the time of conception already, the human being, the spirit is there, and it's just a matter of time before the spirit causes the various secretions and emulsions to diversify, to divide, and to eventually diversify to the point where they become a full human being. So this is the Vedic understanding. Of course, we see that many people make mistakes. So this is happening in the world. It's happening not just once in a while, but it's happening quite frequently. So many people make the mistake then of not only having sex and having a child that they don't want, but then deciding that they want to kill the child. Of course, recently the Supreme Court threw out Roe v. Wade, or the Roe versus Wade statute, which made abortions legal. So some states are fighting it, and so on and so forth. But the problem, of course, is that when people have no idea that sex life brings children into the world, fundamentally that's its purpose. Of course, people know that, but they never think about it before they have sex. They have sex because they want to have sex. And as a result of wanting to have sex, then an unwanted child is there. And then to make it convenient for the living people, the unborn child is killed. And then the child has to become born at some other time in some other womb. And of course, because the way karma works, then the people who created the situation and followed through with the abortion, they too will have to experience the same thing of being aborted in the womb. However, if someone engages in spiritual life, one can eventually overcome the karma that comes with the sinful taking of the life of a child in the womb. So, of course, this is not the story of Diti. She does not stop the abortion. She does not abort her children, nor does she want an abortion. Although she will learn from her husband that her children will become very terrible and that they will cause many people to suffer. That her children will in fact be very big, obnoxious demons. But she will discover that there will be a benediction, actually 2 benedictions. One of them is that her children will be killed directly by the hand of the Supreme Lord, which is a great benediction, even for a demon, to be killed directly by the Supreme Lord. We will find that when a great demon is killed as a result of the anger of the brahmanas, it is totally inauspicious, and they go to hell. However, if a demon is killed directly by the hand of the Supreme Lord, then the Lord purifies that demon, and that is an auspicious death. Of course, the other benediction is that although her 2 sons will be demoniac, her grandson will be a great devotee, and eventually we'll learn about Prahlad, who will be the son of Hiranyakasipu. Although his father will be very demoniac, Prahlad will be nothing like his father. So this is kind of what's coming up in this chapter. So we've kind of gone through a lot of different aspects to try to tie all the pieces together. So from 1 to 7 in this chapter, we'll hear about Vidura asking about the second boar incarnation. Then from 8 to 31, we're going to hear about Diti's being pushed to want to engage in sex with her husband at an inopportune time. Then from 32 to 51, the end of the chapter, we'll find out about the inauspicious children that Diti will give birth to. All right. So, questions, comments, anybody has? Yes. Do we have the microphone?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So, in the first verse, it's mentioned that there's 2 incarnations of Lord Varaha. And I was curious, so the second incarnation, the Red Boar, who's fighting Hiranyaksha, is he also, because I remember reading that he was bringing up the earth again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was thrown into the Garbha ocean by Hiranyaksha, as opposed to being there as a result of the previous annihilation. So at the end of every day of Brahma, there is a partial annihilation, and at the end of every Manu, there's also sometimes a type of annihilation. It's not as thorough as the partial annihilation, but sometimes there is a kind of annihilation then too. So, all right, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
I was thinking when you were talking about the dangers of sex life, I was just trying to like introspect a little bit, like trying to see my mind was reacting. I still see that there's still like attachment, that somehow or another I'm still a big fool, and I haven't realized that's so very dangerous, even though I'm trying to live as a brahmachari. So I wanted to ask what to do. My mind still hasn't recognized, subconsciously, just my mind just hasn't recognized the dangers of sex life yet.
Well, as they say, the best defense is a good offense. So the process of engaging thoroughly in spiritual life and to try to make it your personal mission to try to help deliver other people, that fills the consciousness and our lives with a mission. And then there's not so much possibility of some unwanted interlude slipping in there. Of course, we should all understand that sex life, of all pushings, it's the most intense. It's the most difficult to give up for all human beings, you know. So it's not something to be trifled with. It's very strong, so it's sometimes called adiras, which means it is the fundamental, basic taste or flavor of material happiness, because sex life uses all the senses simultaneously, and it encompasses more than any other activity that a human being does, you know, as far as sensory experience goes. And that's why, to keep from engaging in sex life, then one has to have an alternative, one has to have a strategy. And that's why we're saying that if you engage in spiritual life and you avoid the near occasion of sin, then generally speaking, you'll be okay. And if it becomes too difficult, then one can engage in becoming married and living with a wife and bringing up a family. There's no harm there. And indeed, most people will choose that path. And so that is a legitimate way and a scriptural way of being able to integrate one's sex desire in a way that's not destructive. However, it is more entangling. That's the side issue there. However, again, that's why most people will take that approach. And in this way, somehow or other, we have to fight our way through. Whatever side of the fence we wind up on, we have to fight our way through till the end and try to conquer material desire through the process of engaging in devotional service. So if we're not only trying to engage in chanting nicely, engage in spiritual activities on a complete way, but also in our heart, we are trying really to pull other people out of the material world as best we can through our words and deeds and example, etc., then we have a life that's full. And as I forget who was giving that analogy a day or two ago about you have milk and then you have ink, and if the milk is poured in, it pushes the ink out. Who was that? Okay. So, yes, you have a question.
I just had a quick question, because I remember hearing somewhere that procreation for a brahmachari is creating new devotees.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Like preaching and helping convince new people to take up Krishna consciousness. But Have you heard? Do you remember where that's from?
No, I've never heard that before. So
Okay.
maybe out there somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe it was
Right.
Prabhupada says it somewhere, but I have to research that. But I thought that was always quite nice because that's the way for brahmachari to engage that desire to see new things growing and upcoming.
And that's why we say, the Vedanta Sutra says, Anandamayo Vyasat, the living entity, is pleasure seeking. So there's no way we can live without pleasure. And so Prabhupada says everyone is looking after rasa, taste. We have to have rasa from somewhere. And the question is where? If we're not getting it from spiritual life, we'll need to get it from material life. There's two sources, and that's why we have, Vishaya Vinavartante Niraharasya Dehinam Raso Varyam Rasopiyasya Param Drishva Navartate. That one may be restricted from the objects of the senses, though the taste for sense objects remains. However, ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, one is fixed. How else can people actually stay celibate for many, many years? If it was something I was doing because I was biting my nails, wishing I could do something that everybody else does, I never would have been able to come to this point, But I'm genuinely not really motivated, at least the way I once was, So this idea is there that eventually we get a higher taste. In the beginning, we find that spiritual life is tough. Like we hear in Bhagavad Gita, that happiness in the mode of passion is pleasure in the beginning and like poison at the end. But happiness in the mode of goodness is like poison in the beginning and nectar in the end. So that's kind of the way it is. Our sensibilities are all backwards. Our tree is upside down, But as you continue in spiritual life, the tree turns right side up again. And we find that we genuinely like spiritual life. And we're genuinely satisfied with spiritual life. We're not looking for some miraculous way we can sneak in a few material, buzz bombs here and there. We're actually satisfied with what we're doing, and eventually, like King Kulashekar, says that whenever I think of sex life, my lips curl in distaste, and I spit at the thought. That may be way for most of us, but still, the idea is there that by engaging in spiritual life, we eventually feel not empty, but full. And we feel pleasure, but not pleasure coming from material gratification, which is always mixed with, some smelly and stinky things too. And it also creates problems in the long run. But when you get pleasure from spiritual life, then you feel satisfied, other people feel satisfied, and you are gradually making your way back home, back to Godhead. So, but it takes some time. And that's why we have Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhusangata Bhajana Kriya Tanartha Nivrti Tanishta Ruchista Taha Ata Shaktista Tabhavas Tata Prema Abhyudanshati Sadhakanam Ayam Premna Pradurbhave Bhavet Kramaha. That there are 9 stages of devotional service. First is Shraddha, faith. Then there's sadhu sangha, associating with devotees, and there's bhajana kriya, engaging in various activities given by the spiritual master for purification. Then there's anartha nivrti, overcoming unwanted things. Then after anartha nivrti, there's nishta, or steadiness. Then ruchi, taste. Now, that's the point where we're crossing over from struggling to do the things we should do but don't really want to, and struggling to avoid the things we want to do but we really shouldn't do. So at that point, at ruchi, we cross over, and it becomes actually pleasurable to engage completely in devotional service, and we're not so tempted to go the other way again, to engaging in material desire. And of course it goes on beyond ruchi, which is taste, to atashaktis, which is preliminary appearance of one's original particular relationship with the Supreme. Then there's bhava, which is preliminary love of Godhead, and finally prema, which is full-fledged love of Godhead. So this is like a spectrum, or a gradual progression, or like a etiology. One thing leads to the next. It's a sequence of events that segue one into another. And this is how spiritual life works. So it's not always going to be, as tough as it is in the very beginning. It gets easier. But of course, one can never think that, okay, I'm safe at this point. That's sure way to get to slip and fall, So we always have to recognize that at any time we could fall back into material desire, particularly sex life, because sex life is the most difficult hurdle every human being has to pass over. So it's no small surprise that everybody struggles with it, no matter who you are, saint or sinner involved in the process of spiritual life, or completely ignoring it, man or woman, old or young, all these things there, it's always there, perennial struggle. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So when you're mentioning the 9 stages of devotion, I was wondering, I was hearing yesterday from some of the brahmacharis that only when someone is initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, that they begin bhajana kriya. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask, since I'm not initiated yet, then am I not performing bhajan kriya?
Well, yes and no, technically. That, there are 9 stages, but one has to take them as they come. We can't just jump from one to another. So we have to take them as they come. And when a person is committed to getting a spiritual master, that means that they are on the path of devotional life. Or they may have even committed to getting a spiritual master and understand who their spiritual master is even going to be, which is a little further along. But in any case, one shouldn't rush things. However, eventually one thing will lead to another, and we will move through from one to another to another. Sometimes people feel that, let me just get it over with, and get initiated. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people rush into initiation way before it's actually time for them to do it. They haven't really understood what initiation is, nor have they really thought about who they want to choose as their initiating spiritual master. So that's there as well. But the process will naturally flow from one thing to another, and then the process of purification is happening. Generally speaking, we say that spiritual life begins with initiation, and that one cannot engage in spiritual life without being initiated. However, the Supreme Lord being the Supreme Lord means that in the ultimate issue there are no rules. However, we do say certain things are the general standard. And the reason they're the general standard is because for 99% of the people, that's the way it's going to work out. And so we do the regular things, the standard things, the things that we hear about, Prabhupada taught us about, we see and hear in Bhagavatam and other books like the Nectar of Devotion, etc. We follow these prescriptions because they are generally the accepted way. And for most people, that'll be the more sure-footed way to go. Although, technically speaking, anything can happen. You know, you can't put a box around Krishna. So I just thought I would say that as well. Okay, so it's getting late, and I think everybody's stomach is starting to make certain noises and whatever. So thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.